So, with the information from Amazon and Crystal Dynamics as 2022 closed out, there could be a potential reveal this year. Obviously, it's not going to be an E3, well, because that might not ever happen again, but it can still be done through other means. With that, I thought I'd revisit my favorite of the three most recent adventures of Lara Croft. All games since 2013 were pretty great, but I always thought that Rise of the Tomb Raider was the best of the bunch. It was the best in terms of the story and how the gameplay was executed. Graphically, well, it's not as good as Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but Rise's visuals are still very good to this day. So let's look at the 2015 or 2016 game depending on the platform from the usual aspects, which are graphics, story, and gameplay. For a 7-year-old game, it still looks very good in 2023. From the environments to the character models, Rise can still be used as a benchmark to put some recent releases to shame. Of course, there will be instances where you will notice the lack of detail, and that normally becomes obvious in the hands or clothing of NPCs or some models for some of these standard enemies. Everything else though makes this game look relatively new. The standout parts are the models for Lara and the named NPCs and the environments once you get past the opening sequence. All NPCs that play an important part in the narrative were obviously given more attention, from the facial expressions down to the clothes or equipment they carry. Of course, for the models, Lara's was the best. I mean, yes, motion cap was part of the process, but there's always work to be done by the developer, and they did an excellent job. Her movements, facial expressions, and the detail lent to her clothing are really just great to look at. It's really better compared to some recent games. Another visual aspect that stands out in Rise are the landscapes and design choices that were made. You can see that every location that Lara visits was very intentional or specific in how they are presented. Open areas can be breathtaking, and the devs really just highlight how beautiful a location can be. In enclosed or less spacious areas, the design choices are specific on details that you should pay attention to. In both scenarios of open and tighter areas, the play of light and shadow is really just excellent. In some senses, it gives a surreal effect, which makes sense as the Tomb Raider games are a good mix of real-world situations paired with supernatural threads. So, graphics-wise, Rise of the Tomb Raider is a visual treat. From an audio perspective, it really holds up even today. Background music is great for most cases as it does add a certain sense of mystery. When you're exploring or delving into tombs, the music has that sense of mystery to it that is just appropriate. It gives you a feeling that you are exploring areas where most humans in recent times would never visit. Other non-combat background audio is subtle, but it still evokes a sense of mystery. Now, the combat music, that could be better though. It does try to evoke a sense of danger or excitement, but it feels very generic. There's only one section in the game that has better than average, at least in my opinion, that has better than average combat theme, and it's not even in the closing sections of the game where it's a little bit action-packed. So other combat music are not terrible, but I wish it could have been better or could have evoked a better sense of thrill or danger. For other sounds like voice acting, now I have no complaints in this area. From the important NPCs to Lara Croft especially, they all play their part really well. Now Camilla, the voice actor for Lara, is such a standout in lending her talents to such an important character in the gaming scene. There's youth in her voice, but she also has a sense of fierceness about it, and it really just adds or fits nicely into this evolution of Lara Croft.
I loved Richard. I would have married him if he'd asked. But he was a broken man. I don't want to see you end up like him.
But Anna, he was right. It was everyone else who was wrong. The tomb's in Syria.
Syria? Oh God, Laura, no. This is madness. Get your life sorted. Go home to the manor.
You know I can't go back there.
But this obsession ruined your father.
I saw something. Something I can't explain. Now I understand what Dad was going through.
It's all fairy tales. Nonsense. Don't go down this road. You know where it leads.
It's the only thing that makes sense to me now. I'm going to find the Prophet's tomb, Anna.
This second game in the recent trilogy is an evolution of Lara, and it is a fine one at that. The driving force for the game is again finding a secret that has been hidden away, with Lara and Constantine, the antagonist of the game, being the hunters or the treasure finders. The story simply has better interplay between Lara and the main antagonist. These two characters have somewhat similar goals but vastly differ in terms of how they want to use it. The execution of the plot from start to finish is a mixture of tense moments, realizations, betrayal, clashing of ideas, and even reflections when you take brief pauses via a campfire. I sometimes think that Tomb Raider 2013 had better story overall, but a part of me thinks that at least the way Rise's blending of story with visuals and gameplay elevates it above the two other games slightly. It has good pacing, and the increase in tension was just right as you progress through the game. Also, there is rich lore in games like Tomb Raider. If you think of games like Uncharted or movies like National Treasure, there's always something great to be learned. Of course, games are developers' take on historical settings, but the lore they put in the game is somewhat grounded. This especially applies to little things that you find in the environment or when you explore optional tombs. It's one way of looking at Soviet or Byzantine history in Rise of the Tomb Raider. And as I mentioned earlier, Rise is an evolution of Lara, and this game shows it very well. There is a growth in her character not only in her combat capabilities, but she's also further developing a certain toughness, not just in terms of physicality, but also in mental strength. Yeah, she's very intentional now, or at least the way it's designed is that she's very intentional when she has to take out enemies, but this isn't done out of pure savagery. It's more about necessity, but with less or zero hesitation. She's strong mentally in that she can go face to face with the main antagonist, but it's also shown in her conversations with other characters. She shows heightened maturity when handling difficult scenarios, and it really builds up nicely as the plot goes along. If you wanted to see the turning point of Lara morphing into a hardened, but not necessarily inhumane hunter, then Rise is the game you want to see. For me, this is the highlight of Rise, and it's also why I consider it to be the best in the series. While Lara is tougher now compared to 2013, I normally choose to be sneaky. It's great because the game offers you the tools to execute this type of play. There are generous amounts of scenarios where you can just open up in stealth, and if you do it right, you can also clear a room or area very quietly without the risk of raising the alert level. There are multiple skills and upgrades you can take to enhance or strengthen this type of play, and you normally do this when you visit campfire sites. There are items you can grab in the environment from your enemies, from your side quests, or even loot specials from tombs that will give you the resources you need to build your playstyle, whether that's sneaky or the guns blazing type. Of course, this isn't like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, where you can complete a game or the game without ever being in combat. But when you are in those scenarios, Rise of Tomb Raider is okay. I mean, it is exciting when you get into a firefight, and you just have to be impressed. I mean, the way Lara can be such a badass. Not only does she handle bows and handguns with ease, but she can go at it with a high-powered rifle. Now, combat movements, yeah, they can feel a bit loose like Uncharted, but it's not something uncontrollable. You are still able to maneuver Lara from cover to cover, fire your weapon, chuck a grenade, and it's all done with, I would say a good sense of control. So whether you prefer being sneaky or rushing in with your guns out, Rise feels good, but I do prefer the stealth play. The other aspects of exploration and platforming are still great, like 2013 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Visually, the final game in the trilogy is better, but mechanics-wise, I think Rise is pretty much equal. I mean, each game in the series has its share of good and not so good tomb design. Traversal mechanics in Rise are of course top-notch and are very specific or intentional. There will be some locked away techniques or tools that will only be accessible as you progress the game or at the later portion in the game, and these will be necessary to open up some of the tombs and some of the little areas that might offer additional resources or information, but they are not mandatory and not really needed to progress the game. Now, some optional tombs will slightly be out of the way, but the tools and access to them will still be in the same general zone. While fast travel via camp or the campsite mechanic it's available, it's not something you need to do for optional content. Yeah, you may need to use the fast travel mechanic just to access those little areas that offer some amounts of resources. But yeah, it's really small, and that makes me say that Rise is not a Metroidvania experience. Well, it's often the case that the second game in a trilogy is usually the best. Now, when I say that though, Rise isn't better by a huge margin. Shadow and the 2013 game have their great points, but Rise is my pick of the three. The way it was crafted, the three pillars of game design were blended together in a fine way. I'm really hoping we get an announcement this year for the next Tomb Raider game, and maybe we'll see something solid in 2024, or hopefully, the next game itself. Well, you got Crave here. Thanks for watching.